How's it, everybody? Celtic Link here. We're back for another Dokkan battle video. In today's video, we are continuing our beginner's guide for all you new Dokkan players out there. In our previous video, we covered the basics of a unit, that is understanding their types, the type advantaged wheel, and how it helps you deal super effective damage or take less damage from certain types of units. In this video, we will talk about the unit and their kits, that is how a unit's super attacks, how their leader skills, how their passives, and other special things that make the unit unique interact with one another. We will also talk about the hidden potential and link skill system in a future video, along with team building, acquiring new units through summoning, and through free-to-play methods, along with how to awaken all those units and put them together on a team. Following that, we will talk about item and resource management. Doing all of this, leveling up your links, investing in your hidden potential, and awakening your units cost items and resources. So we'll talk to you how to make sure you don't run out of items too quickly in your early start in Dokkan. Once we have all of that, we will put all of that information together, and you, the viewer, will help me create a team using the information we learn to take on a challenge event with a team of your choosing. So hopefully you find this beginner's guide well, and hopefully you learn a thing or two that you may not necessarily have known. So with that, let's go ahead, let's hop in. We are going to use the Furious Counterattack Goku as our example when we talk about a unit's passive. I use him because most of you probably have this unit already. Even if you're just starting Dokkan, the game basically forces you to grind out this character. So at a minimum, you've at least got one copy of the character's SSR recruited, even if you may not have his LR status just yet. So let's kick things off. Let's talk about his leader skill. His leader skill is all types, key 3, HP attack and defense 59%. This is a very basic leader skill for a very basic unit that every new player will probably have. His leader skill is designed as an all types lead, so that way no matter what units you acquire in your early days of Dokkan, you will have a leader for them, even if it is a low leader such as 59%. Now, let's talk about the various different types of leader skills. Now, this guy does lead all types, which means you can basically run any type of character, super or extreme, under this guy's leader skill. So you'll see that this guy has a 59%, but some of the higher all types leads have like 100, 120, or 77 with the Gohan. They are difficult event acquired. This Goku here is acquired from playing for 1,000 days, so unlikely that you're going to have these guys. So this guy is the best all types leader for you as a new player. But that isn't the only type of leader skills. You will also have class type leader skills. For example, if you were to start out on a banner where one of these two were featured, like for right now on Global, we have the Dokkan Fest Bardock celebration where this Frieza is featured. You can run any type, super or extreme, under their leader skill, right? Super for the Goku, extreme for the Frieza, and they lead those types for 130%. If for some reason you found yourself having either this Vegito or Rose, it's the same deal, except they're 140% post EZA. I know it says 120 here, but this isn't including their EZA. 140%, provided you have all 5 types on your team, super or extreme. So definitely good ways to go about it for these all types leader skills. They're very helpful for new players. Now, we do have other free-to-play options, but they are difficult to grind out or take time that you may not necessarily be able to do right when you're first starting Dokkan, right? There is the all-class super type for 90% with the Vegito, or the 100% Extreme with the LR Metal Cooler Army. But again, these characters you're not likely to have starting out. We do have other typings for specific leader skill, or other leader skills for specific typings, such as the now Easy Aid 120 typing leads. All of these guys lead a specific type for 120, super or extreme. We do have various different typings with certain LRs. If you were to start a game with a guaranteed LR pull, like during the anniversary, and you pulled one of these guys, you would have 120% on these specific leaders if you were to pull them. These guys tend to be available for free during major celebrations, so you could pull them that way as well to give you a 100 leader skill boost post Easy A. The rest of these guys are 120 after their Easy A. Now, speaking of 120 leads, the Dokkan has up to 130 for specific typing leads, whether super or extreme, right? And the different types. Every character you see here on the list leads them for 130%. So if you were to have one of these guys and you wanted to build a mono team, you would definitely want to run them as your leader. This isn't really the current meta that we're in, but it is helpful for clearing stages early on. About the only place once you're past a certain point where you'll be using mono teams is probably Dokkan Ultimate Clash, but we'll save that for another video. But that is basically one major type of leader skill. It is probably the most abundant of typings, just because so many different units have a various type leader skill. But we are currently in a category meta, meaning every character that releases, aside from certain free-to-play or maybe banner characters or LR characters on yellow coin banners, every character has some form of category lead, whether they're leading Pure Saiyans or Full Power or some combination of any of these. A character will lead one of these. The highest single leader skill we have is for 170 pre-7th anniversary. So most characters you're going to pull are going to fall into that category. They're going to have some type of 170 for one or more of these categories. To give you an example of what I mean here, let's see if I can find them. These guys, right? The LR Tech Gogeta leads Time Limit or Connected Hope for Key 3, HP attack, HP 130%, and attack and defense 170. So he is what we would call a sort of pseudo 170 lead. And he leads to categories, right? So the way it works with the category meta is we don't have one specific category. Like I said, every character has one or two. This means you can run a character that is either on this time limit category or this connected hope category under their leader skill. They don't have to be on both. They can be on either or. And this idea of either or really comes into effect when we start looking at what is now our current meta. Our current meta is the 200% leader skill meta, where if I can find my example here, the best example of this is one of the characters that introduced it. We have a 200% leader skill meta, where you have a character who leads two different categories for 170, but if any of the characters on either of those characters exist on a third category, you get an extra 30, totaling in a 200% stat buff to HP attack and defense for those categories. So for example, you could run characters on the LR 7-year gods here, Power Beyond Super Saiyan, or movie heroes, and as long as those characters are on Kamehameha, they receive an extra 30%, totaling in 200% towards their stats at one of the various levels. So that means they can provide a huge buff, and this is pretty much the current meta we're in. Every Dokkan Fest TUR or every LR has some form of 200% meta, unless you're talking about obviously Carnival LRs. Carnival LRs are just one category, 200%, but those are few and far between, and you're unlikely to have those, as so far they've only shown up 4 times since their release. Last year's WWC, this year's 8th anniversary, and a double rates banner somewhere in between. So they aren't too abundant as of yet. But those are the basics of the leader's skills, and you can see that they all play a different effects, right? You're talking about adding percentages to a character. That plays a huge role because the leader skill is the first basic percentage buff that a character is going to get to their stats. The next piece of raising their stats is going to come in their passive skills. Every character has different types of passives, and we're going to kind of go over the gist of most of the basic types of passives to give you an idea of how most units will work when you start to see similar wording and similar phrasing. So when we talk about passives, this is the next level of percentage buffs. When we use the Goku here, for example, he's getting attack and defense 59%, plus an additional attack and defense 59% when performing a super attack. He is a support unit that gives all allies key 2 HP and attack and defense 30%, and an additional key 3 to himself and attack 59% when he's attacking extreme class enemies. This is a very basic passive, and it covers basically everything you need to know about how a unit's passive works. A unit will always have some type of initial buff. In most characters nowadays, that buff ranges somewhere between 150 and 250, depending on the character. Some characters have had 250, but that's because their base stats tend to be pretty low. But regardless, every character has some type of flat buff here. Attack and defense, whatever it is. If I can show you an example here, right here, right? So like this Int Pan, who we'll talk about more in a second, right? She gives key 2 and herself attack and defense 150. If we look at this Tech Gogeta, attack and defense 120%, right? So every character has some type of initial buff with their passive. When we talk about other things, a lot of characters also get an additional when they're performing a super attack. Some don't, some do, but when you see this, you know that whatever it gets, once you pick up your key sphere, you will notice the attack and defense on your character goes up by whatever that percentage buff is. So that can be helpful. Obviously, for units to survive attacks before they super, you don't want units that have this. This means that this character is ideally placed in the second or third slot when battling, since they don't have this extra defense pre-super attack. Now, this character is also a support unit. Various types of support unit exists, ranging from 20% all the way up to 50% at the highest. This Goku, for example, is a 30% leader. Most banner units that you pull within the game that are support units are 40% leaders, but we are slowly approaching a meta where we actually have 50% support units, and they work a lot like the categories in a 200% leader skill, right? So for example, this Int Pan, I told you we'd come back to her. She gives superhero allies key 1 and attack and defense 30%. However, if you also have characters who are also on Bond of Parent-Child or Bond of Master and Disciple, they get an extra 1 and 20% to attack and defense, totaling in 50%. So this tends to be the way most banner units are going, and it works out pretty well. But you can see that support units typically have some type of setup like that. Speaking of support units, since we're here, we'll go ahead and talk about them. Mostly support units are designed to do exactly that. They aren't designed to hit hard, they are designed to support their allies. So a support unit will typically either have really, really high defense or something to mitigate attacks. So for example, this Pan here as a support unit has the ability to stun the enemy. So she can support and then stun enemies in most cases to be able to keep herself from attacking. Now she also has an additional layer, just in case she doesn't stun. She has the ability to dodge. I believe her dodge chance is a medium chance, right? So she has a 30% chance to dodge. It's not a whole lot, but it does help her to be able to mitigate that damage that she could possibly take as a support unit, since her overall stats, as you see, aren't that high, whether at 55% or at rainbow status. So just something to consider. Now, there are other types of characters, right? When we talk about units that support, We have basically every character in the game has one of these effects within their passive. They will either have some type of raising attack or raising HP, some type of boosting, some type of stunning. This could also be found in the super attack as well. They might have some type of damage reduction or guard or ability to foresee super attack. Every unit has some ability like these worked into their passive, and how those work will vary from unit to unit, but a lot of them have the basics, right? Like we saw with that Pan. As a support unit, she has the ability to help herself. Another example of units with support, right? This is a free-to-play support. Key to attack and defense 30% to Goku's family. Like I mentioned before, he has that initial attack and defense. Now, these guys are kind of old, so that's why their stats and buffs are pretty basic and pretty low, but you see the general picture. Other types of passive units that you have, right? We have, where are they? All right, we have nuking style passives. We'll start with this. So these are characters who basically, they get stronger based on the amount of key spheres they obtain. Most that you run into are going to be unconditional nukers, right? They just basically, it's a flat buff, 20%, 30%, 35%, 12% per key sphere obtained, and it doesn't even matter the type, it's just unconditional. Some have specific typings, like this Broly here, where you need Fizz key sphere specifically to activate his 20% or his 50% in the TUR and SSR status. You also have others that can collect any key sphere whatsoever, but they tend to be on the weaker side. Like the two free-to-play units, they get 20% per attack and defense per key sphere obtained. However, they are free-to-play units, so they are actually kind of weak. Now, along with the passive, I want to mention there are specific nuking leads, like these guys up here, who give a 35, 33, and 30% buff to whatever characters fall under their leader's skill. So it's basically all characters you put under them as lead get 35, if you're using these two, 35% attack and defense per key sphere obtained. So if you want to clear certain stages, like single stages real fast, it's really easy to load up two of these guys as your lead and your friend lead, and then just use orb changing items and allow you to nuke any event. So these is just one type of passive. Like I said, we mentioned that. I mentioned support type passives. We also have what I call pseudo nuking passives. Basically, these guys get different buffs based on the amount of key spheres they obtain, right? So, example, this Sen Shenron, right? He orb changes, which is another type of passive, but he also gets different buffs based on how many he gets, right? So he might get attack and defense 50% if he gets 2 or more key spheres obtained. If he gets 3 or more, he would get a total of 100. Right, 150 with 5 or more. He disables guard with 5 or more. He has a high chance of performing a crit with 6 or more. And he gets, on top of everything he got before, he gets an attack and defense 70% and a high chance of launching an additional attack with 7 or more. So he's not quite a nuker, but he is getting stronger the more HP attack and defense he gets. And a lot of characters nowadays are getting buffs like this with like sort of a pseudo nuking passive. Other types of passives you have are not these guys. Like this, you have damage reducing passives, right? This guy's passive is almost entirely designed around reducing damage received, right? Down here. So this guy reduces damage received by 77%. This is probably, aside from the AGL LR Frieza, this is the second highest, but it is conditional to movie bosses or pure Saiyans. Some characters have as low as 30%, but any type of damage reduction tends to be very good and helps your units out a lot. So definitely a good type of passives. You want to pay attention to units that have damage reduction in their passive, as they may be beneficial to help out your slot 1, as most characters aren't that defensive in the first slot before they super. Another type of passive we have are dodging passives. We have like the AGL LR UI Goku from the 6-year anniversary. This man has a great chance to dodge, which is 70% chance to dodge all attacks coming his way. This is really good because on top of the build that he gets, like a normal character, he gets his attack and defense 150%. He has ways to build up other ways through his super attacks, but he also is able to dodge. This is what we call dodge tanking, and it can work well, but obviously because it's dodging, there is a chance that it fails, and that's a consideration, a risk you have to take. Most units that have pure dodge like this have a way to build up their dodge. For example, right, when we look at this UI Goku, he actually gets more defense every time he evades an attack. So it's really, really good for characters that can dodge. Some characters have a dodge, but they get no extra defense or extra anything like that when they do. For example, this AGL Gogeta. This AGL Gogeta has a medium or a high chance of dodging, which is a 50% chance, but we're onto him because his chance to dodge has no extra conditions. It just is. It doesn't give him anything extra, but he has another type of passive, a transformation passive, right? Basically, this guy can transform into Super Saiyan Blue Gogeta after a certain amount of turns have passed. I believe it is 4 turns now that he is EZA. So sometimes you have transforming units that have the transformation built into their passive. And that is pretty much it for the basics of the passives. All units will follow some type of basic trends with this, whether they are transforming, whether they have that basic buff, whether they have that super attack buff, whether they have some type of orb buff, whether they have the ability to dodge, or they have some type of sealing or stunning in their passive. Every unit will have something in them that makes them unique and makes them consider how to place them in your team. So this brings us to super attacks. I want to talk about these before I talk about active skills, right? So every character has a specific super attack. So once all of the buffs from the passive are figured out and calculated for your unit can then launch a super attack based on how many key spheres you get. And it can be more or less powerful depending on what type of character you're using. So if you're using an LR character as such, these characters actually have 2 types of super attacks, a super attack and an ultra super attack with different multipliers on each. If you're talking about TUR type characters like this, they only have 1 super attack with only 1 multiplier. Basically, the way it works is every super attack will have some type of effect, whether it's raising attack or defense, whether it's stunning, whether it's sealing, or buffing the allies. A super attack will do something, but then it also has a multiplier for your character and the amount of damage it receives, right? So the Goku, for example, all of his buffs get calculated. He gets the percentage buff to all of his stats. His leader skill gets calculated, and then he launches a super attack with all of those buffs. On his super attack, he is now raising attack and defense for you by 30%, and then he's causing what's known as colossal damage to the enemy. And if we go ahead and we look over here, let me find it, here it is. This is a little chart on the wiki that kind of explains the meaning of all of these multipliers. So like in that Goku, for example, right, if you had him all the way up to LR status at super attack 20, when he launches a super attack, his attack is being multiplied by 425%, the damage that gets calculated after all of those attack buffs from his passive are calculated. So that can make your numbers look really, really huge. If he ends up launching his ultra super attack, which as we can see here, deals mega colossal damage, we are talking about a... where did it go? There it is. we are talking about a 570 multiplier. And that's basically the same for all LRs. They will fall into one of those two categories, whether you're dealing their 18 or their 12 key super attack. Most TURs are going to fall into the immense damage area or supreme damage. So those guys, because a TUR only goes up to super attack 10, you are getting either a 505 bonus or a 430% bonus once all of the passive buffs have been calculated. There are a few other multipliers that aren't listed here, such as ultimate damage, which is usually seen on active skills, and tremendous damage, which is usually seen on counter moves. Now, if you have an LR EZA that can go up to 25 super attack, you're talking about a 620 extra buff once they are launching their 18 key super. So you can really see why it is important to level up your super attack, and we will do a later video about managing those resources, right? To level up characters super attack, you either have to use a character with the same name or an Elder Kai, and we'll talk more about that in a separate video. But understand that this is the basics of how a super attack works and how the multiplier gets calculated after the passive gets calculated. From there, I do want to jump into active skills since I mentioned the type of damage they deal. A lot of characters nowadays tend to have some type of active skill, and every active skill has a different type of effect, right? You have characters like the Goku here, whose active skill can be activated, almost unconditionally, basically from the 5th turn. But his causes damage and raises attack. Not all active skills will deal damage like this, but most will have some type of effect for either the character or your allies. This one specifically will raise the attack for Goku, so that way when you see temporarily, you know that this means it's raising him just for him at the moment of the active skill. So whatever the buff is, I think, does it show here? 30%, and then deals the ultimate damage multiplier. So you can see how active skills can be very, very helpful to dealing extra damage before your character has a chance to launch a super attack. Other active skills include things like, where are they? These guys here, they have a transformation-based active skill, which basically fuses the character into a whole new character, right? These guys fuse into the Gogeta here using their active skill. Every active skill, like I said, has some type of condition, whether that active skill transforms them into a new character and makes them more powerful, or launches some type of attack dealing effect. A lot of characters also give buffs on their active skill, like giving crit to the whole squad the turn they use their active skill, and it can be very helpful for kind of last-ditch effort finishing off enemies if you want help in that areas. One other type of active we have, where is it? Is these guys here. You have exchange type actives. You have characters who have the ability to exchange with one another using an active skill. Or actually, these guys, theirs isn't active. Theirs is actually through a passive once they fall below 50%. So, but they do have an active skill which does basically give you the chance to dodge all attacks, right? So this is another one. It doesn't deal damage, but it does allow you to dodge. So utility in an active skill, right? I thought I had them up here. Here they are. Yes, these guys have an active skill that allows you to exchange. So really, really good, really, really helpful, the different types of active skills, and they're all situational, right? You may have a situation where it may be better to hold on to your active skill, or it may be in a situation where you want to use it right away. Knowing what the active skill does and how it works in conjunction with the rest of your unit's passive is very, very key. And we do have one last type of unit, and that is these guys here, the giant form characters. These guys can exist, these can either exist in passive form or in active skill form. I wanted to save them for last because they kind of cover two areas, like the exchange characters, right? They can transform basically into a giant version of themselves, which usually hit very, very hard. LR Piccolo is the perfect example of this. Even the Metal Cooler here are the perfect example of this. Giant form characters tend to be invulnerable. That's the neat thing about them. They basically cannot be killed for however many turns they're on the field. Some are on the field for 1 turn, some can be on the field for as long as 3 turns, and it's basically free damage the entire time you're there. You may not be dealing as much damage as your main rotation characters, but it is free damage where you cannot take damage. So it's really, really useful. And again, a lot of these characters have the condition either via an active skill, like you see here, or happening automatically when you fall below a certain HP threshold. I think, yeah, and that pretty much covers it for the unit passives. Those are the basics of the unit passives, including active skills. I do think they need to be kind of included together. Here is a list of the different types of active skills. You can see you have damage dealing active skills. You have miscellaneous active skills that might deal damage, but might not necessarily deal damage, but help the player out in... Here it is. There we go. Help the player out with various buffs. Like Kid Buu, for example, just straight up raises his attack and defense. B-Pan massively raises attack for all allies. This guy raises allies and heals with his active skill. So there's lots of different actives that play into your character, and you want to be paying attention to these because all of these make up what your character can and cannot do and how they work together with other characters, right? If you have a character with a setup like this, for example, I mentioned this earlier, like the version Z Goku, when your character gets most of their attack and defense when performing a super attack, you can know that this character needs to go in either slot 2 or slot 3 because they have no start of turn defense. Whereas, for example, this Tech God Goku, because he has start of turn defense, and he has damage reduction, and he has damage reduction and attack and defense with Key Sphere obtained, like those pseudo-nukers, right? He can actually serve as a slot 1 unit. So while they may not link well together, we'll talk more about links in another video, you could put this Goku in slot 1, and then him be able to take any super attacks you may take pre-attacking, and then put this guy in slot 2 or 3, and then be able to attack safely without worrying about being attacked before you get your extra buffs in, which a character like this would need to do his super attack in order to get. It's also noticing I specifically used the God Goku as an example because now you can see that the characters have... Where is it? The God Goku... Or the Goku here is supporting the other allies, so he's also giving that 30% to the God Goku or any other unit you have on the team. So that goes more into a video we'll talk about later where you talk about units who work well together and putting them together on a team. But you just really want to understand here the basics of the unit, how they work together, and what their different super attack effects mean. Oh, one last type of super attack effect. I knew I had these guys up for a specific reason. Where are they? These two right here. Some units on their super attack, I'll leave you guys with this, have the ability to raise attack and defense infinitely. Unlike the version Z Goku, who just raises it right here on the spot for 1 turn, these guys here raise it infinitely. So in longer content, in events that run 14, 15, 16 turns, a character like this can end up building a lot of attack or defense. So like these characters specifically build defense, but you have other characters who build attack, and a character like this building defense over time can eventually be placed in slot 1, even though they don't necessarily have the initial start of turn defense. So something to consider in conjunction with all of these. You have all of these things to consider when looking at a new unit that you have pulled. And I know that's a lot to go over. I know that's a lot to process. And don't worry, we're going to keep coming back to a lot of this stuff so we can put it together and eventually start looking at how they fit together in a team. And that will be in one of our following videos. Up next, we will be covering the hidden potential and link skill system, showing you how those two things play an effect on everything we just talked about in this video. So anyways, guys, that is the video. That is the basics of a unit. That is the basic of their super attack, their passives, their active skills, and everything in between. Hopefully you guys found this guide helpful. If you did, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And in the comments down below, let me know if you are a newer player, how long have you been playing for, and did you find anything useful in this guide? I know a lot of it seems very obvious, but a lot of things you might have missed. I know there were quite a few things here I didn't really understand when I first started playing, so I put this guide together hopefully to help you guys out, learn from some of the things that maybe I didn't necessarily know when I started. So, like I said, guys, that is the video, and if nothing else, thanks for watching, and aloha.